Governor Mills says she will allow a bill that limits Maine law enforcement agencies' cooperation with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, to become law. The bill was passed by both chambers of the legislature in June, but Mills delayed her decision until the beginning of the next session. Under the bill, Maine law enforcement agencies would no longer be allowed to arrest or detain a person for immigration purposes. The legislation also bars correctional facilities from informing ICE that a person who may be undocumented is being held at that facility. Mills called the bill imperfect, but said the state cannot turn a blind eye to ICE's unacceptable actions. The sponsor of the bill says local and state agencies can still continue working with federal partners to investigate serious crimes, including terrorism, drug trafficking, and human trafficking. House Republicans claim the bill shields criminals and weakens efforts to prevent violent crime by restricting law enforcement access to individuals who are already in custody. For more details on this story, you can go to our website.